On the 12th of April 1857, in a small room on the top floor of an Edinburgh townhouse, with a small window overlooking the new town skyline of rooftops and chimneys, dashing Irish aristocrat Charles Yelverton placed his hand on the Book of Common Prayer and declared himself the husband of Teresa Longworth. That moment was to lead to betrayal, abandonment and bitter recriminations for the couple's scandalous romance. She scandalized 19th century high society by daring to demand recognition as the legal spouse of a bed-hopping cad. Hers was a heroic struggle, leading to a decade of Byzantine legal actions and a change in the law in Ireland. Major Charles Yelverton, later to become the 4th Viscount Avonmore, was an Irish Protestant nobleman and soldier in the Royal Artillery. In a chance encounter, he first met Teresa Longworth. She was born in 1832 and was the youngest of 6 children of a Manchester silk manufacturer. Her mother died when she was 8, and Teresa was educated in France at Boulogne-sur-Mer in a convent of Ursuline nuns, which was where she became a Roman Catholic convert. Years later, she became a nurse for the Sisters of Charity during the Crimean War. Her father died when she was 20, leaving her a private income, which she used to travel in Europe and the Near East. An adventurous spirit, though not conventionally pretty, she certainly had the power to charm and influence others. The Honourable Charles Yelverton's background was very different. Born in 1820, the second son of Viscount Avonmore of Belle Isle, County Tipperary, he was a major in the Royal Artillery. He is described as about 35 years at the date of the scandal, a good-looking man with dark, deeply set eyes and a resolute face. He seemed to be in perpetual debt, which was not unusual for young army officers of his time. Little is known about his personal life and general character, although the Yelverton family had an ambiguous reputation. Their ancestry derived from an 18th century English merchant, and their Avonmore title was given to his grandfather for supporting the Act of Union. They had originally met on a cross-channel steamer one summer evening in 1852. They sat up all night on deck talking, and the next day Yelverton escorted Longworth to the place where she was to stay in London. He was the penniless youngest son and could not afford to marry, but at the same time did not want to lose contact with this fascinating woman. For the next 3 years, the only contact between them was through a series of flirtatious and increasingly affectionate letters. Following the outbreak of war in the Crimea in 1854, Yelverton was posted there on active service. He found Longworth there too, working with the French Sisters of Charity. The French army in the Crimea, unlike their British allies, had an efficient medical service. Hospital care was organised by nuns, aided by lay nurses, of whom Longworth was one. These nurses were dressed like novice nuns, so Longworth came to meet Yelverton wearing the blue-grey dress of a Sister of Charity. He was so enchanted with her appearance that he embraced and kissed her. Then, according to Longworth, he asked her to marry him, and this was where their first real difference arose. She wanted a public ceremony in a Catholic church after the war. He wanted an immediate, secret Greek Orthodox marriage. Longworth refused. He explained that he had promised his family not to marry, hence the need for absolute secrecy. It is not clear how seriously she took this explanation, and seems to have thought it more likely that he feared his family's reaction to a bourgeois bride. She suggested that if he cared so much about social differences, maybe they should break off their engagement. Never having any connection with Ireland, she was ignorant of another possible reason for Yelverton's reluctance to marry in public. To discourage Protestants from marrying Catholics, a statute of George II declared the Irish Catholic marriage ceremony invalid for a Protestant, though valid for a Catholic. Consequently, in Ireland, most Catholic Protestant couples had a public ceremony performed by a Church of Ireland minister, according to the rites of the Anglican Church, then a renewal of marriage vows before a Catholic priest. Longworth could hardly have known about this, but Yelverton was aware that a Catholic marriage in Ireland would be as invalid for him as it had been for his grandfather. He may have counted on eventually making a wealthy union, in which love would not necessarily figure, but in the meantime there was Teresa Longworth. Could he induce her to live with him, believing herself to be his wife, but in the eyes of the law actually his mistress? From his own later admissions, it seems that this was the plan he had in mind. She began to notice that Yelverton, although still professing his love for her, was avoiding mention of actual marriage. She suggested that perhaps they could try out a platonic living arrangement of some kind. His response was to return to England. Letters were sent between the couple, conciliatory on her side, apologetic on his, and when Yelverton became commanding officer at Leith Fort in Edinburgh in February 1857, Longworth arrived with her friend, Arabella Macfarlane, who was another Catholic convert and a sister of charity, and they both took lodgings in the Newtown area of the city at No. 1 St. Vincent Street. The two women visited people to whom they had introductions, wrote letters, practiced the piano, and studied languages. Every day, with the exception of Saturdays and Sundays, Yelverton would visit and spend several hours with them. Occasionally, they both went out riding together, but if they were ever alone indoors, Macfarlane was within earshot in the next room, as was the convention at the time. One day, Macfarlane had difficulty hearing anything. It was the 6th of April 1857, when Yelverton and Longworth quietly read the marriage service from a Church of England prayer book, pledged fidelity to each other, and gave the appropriate responses, the whole ceremony consisting what was termed a Scotch marriage, which, although irregular, was legally valid. Some time later, Yelverton denied that any such ceremony ever took place, and there was no evidence available to contradict him. At the end of the month, he went to visit his family in Ireland, and Longworth to friends in Hull, and Macfarlane to enter a convent. The couple wrote frequently to each other, and the tone of the letters of both suggests their Scotch marriage had not yet been consummated. Yelverton still insisted that a public ceremony was out of the question. Longworth refused to cohabit with him without a proper Catholic ceremony. Eventually, Yelverton agreed to a Catholic marriage, as long as it took place in Ireland. He bought a wedding ring in Dublin. Longworth joined him at Waterford, and they travelled to Rostover in County Down. On this journey, which lasted for 2 weeks, they cohabited for the first time as man and wife, signed hotel registers as a married couple, and were assumed to be on their honeymoon. She had yielded to her lover in anticipation of what she evidently considered their real marriage. On the way to Rostover, she had a meeting with the Catholic Bishop of Dromore, and was told that banns could be dispensed with, as the couple was simply regularizing their clandestine Scotch marriage. After Mass on the 15th of August 1857, in the parish church of Kilbrony near Rostrevor, as soon as the congregation left, the couple knelt before the altar, holding hands, and Father Bernard Mooney conducted a renewal of the matrimonial consent. Even had there been no previous marriage, this ceremony would still constitute a valid one for both parties, according to the Catholic Church, though not according to Irish civil law. The couple explained their need for secrecy to Father Mooney, asking him not to enter details of their marriage in any public register, which he agreed to. As it happens, at the time, under a statute, any marriage between a Catholic and a Protestant, or a marriage between two Protestants celebrated by a Catholic priest, was null and void. The couple continued their Irish honeymoon before returning to Edinburgh. They lived unobtrusively as a married couple, acknowledged as such by their friends and those of Longworth's relatives, whom she had told about the situation under a pledge of secrecy. Apart from a Highland trip undertaken in October, they stayed in Edinburgh until December of that year. Longworth went to visit friends in Hull and was joined by Yelverton when he could get leave. Just before Christmas, she wrote to say that she was certain that she was pregnant. Yelverton replied promptly, saying that they had no option but concealment. The solution, he thought, would be to stay abroad until the child was born. He was always noticeably careful to avoid using words like wife, child, or marriage in his letters. Early in 1858, he obtained a passport for Longworth in the name of Yelverton, and the couple travelled to France and stayed there until he had to return to Leith. Longworth was unable to accompany him, since she was now so ill, which seems to have been quite severe, as it resulted in a miscarriage. In one of her subsequent letters, in which she referred to herself as a wife, was mistakenly opened by a member of the Yelverton family, who knew about her but not of the marriage. Her husband told her what had happened, impressing upon her the continuing need for secrecy, even in her letters to him. She responded by asking him to at least tell his mother that they were man and wife. When she returned to Edinburgh at the beginning of June, her reunion with her husband was not a happy one. While Longhurst was ill in France, Yelverton had been seeing Emily Forbes. She was a general's daughter and the widow of a professor at Edinburgh University, and had inherited £50,000, so was considerably better off than Longhurst. Yelverton proposed to Emily, and was accepted. He came to Longhurst Hotel, not to join her, but to demand that she renounce her status as his wife, emigrate on her own to New Zealand, which he would give her the money for, and start a new life there. He added that their marriage had been imprudent and had ruined him. As it happens, it had not left him poorer, for all their living expenses of the previous year conveniently had been paid by Longworth. She flatly refused to leave the country, or to renounce the status she believed to be rightfully hers. Yelverton left, promising to see her again the following day. He did not keep his promise, because he had arranged to marry Emily that day, the 26th of June. In January the following year, determined to protect her status and reputation, Longworth brought a case of declaration of marriage against Yelverton. In short, she wanted to prove once and for all that the pair were legally married. Yelverton found himself embroiled in a scandal. He was suspended from all military duties and forced to live on half pay. He denied bigamy and argued that Longworth had pursued him relentlessly, but their relationship, including the horseback tour, had always been illicit, even though the couple had signed the visitors' book at Doune Castle on November 1857 as Mr. and Mrs. Yelverton. Longhurst took legal advice and brought proceedings against Yelverton on the 7th of August, seeking a declaration that she was entitled to a wife's maintenance. She relied for proof on the validity of the Irish marriage. In June the following year, Yelverton brought a counter-action to have it declared that he was free of any marriage with the defendant and to silence her. Longworth abandoned the original case, starting a new one in 1860, which took into account both marriages. The case came before Lord Ardmillan in Edinburgh, who found in favour of Yelverton, although he thought the defendant was probably guilty of perjury. His judgment was promptly reversed by the Scottish Court of Appeal. The evidence offered by both parties in the case was fragmentary, confused, and mostly consisted of correspondence between the couple. Not only were their letters written in an obscure and dramatic style, packed with foreign language quotations, but some were incomplete or partly lost, either by accident or design. The lawyers attached great importance to the letters because they gave essential clues to the true motives of both parties in a complicated and controversial case. Yelverton was transferred by the army to Cork, and the Longworth-Yelverton case recommenced with an action for maintenance in February 1861. It was brought against him to recover the cost of items supplied by Longhurst. If he was her husband, he would have to pay. Both parties were cross-examined in detail before a crowded court, a dramatic ordeal in which Longhurst came off by far the best. Yelverton said that he had never seen Longhurst as anything more than a mistress, that he would never condescend to marry a social inferior, a Catholic, from an English manufacturing family, adding that he had told her he never intended to marry her anyway, and argued that she did not believe that either of the ceremonies was a valid marriage. Attempting to blacken Longhurst's moral character, he portrayed her as being more affectionate and less guarded than himself. The Irish judge found little to like about Charles Yelverton. Longhurst, on the other hand, garnered sympathy with her wish simply to be recognised as a legal wife. The court agreed that she had been unwise, but admired her courage, seeing her as a victim rather than the character of Yelverton's account. The jury found in favour of Longworth. She was overjoyed by the verdict, and supported by Irish public opinion, thought naively that her erstwhile husband would return to her. Instead, he appealed to the House of Lords. When the case finally reached the Lords in 1864, the evidence was reviewed by 5 judges, whose decision hinged on the lack of independent evidence on the Scotch marriage. By one vote, judgment was given in favour of Yelverton. He was declared innocent of bigamy, his Catholic marriage invalid, and the marriage to Emily Forbes lawful. A senior judge was one of those who believed that it was time to amend the law on mixed Catholic-Anglican marriage and of perceived unfair consequences. He said he would like to see the Scotch marriage in all its variations abolished. The Marriage Causes and Marriage Law Amendment Act of 1870 was passed, and in Ireland from then on a mixed marriage before a Catholic priest became valid and lawful. The legal struggle brought the couple notoriety. Longhurst was alternately vilified and celebrated, portrayed as a victim who had been mercilessly abandoned, and accused of being a lascivious seducer. Sometimes she was depicted as innocent and pure, and others as a ruthless social climber. After 6 years of trials and appeals, she finally lost her case. In the process, she had become a minor celebrity. Longworth was declared an unmarried woman, her life blighted and her reputation gone, and she started to travel again. She had already produced a novel based on her recent experience, but started to produce books based on her travels. Such a wandering career was probably the only one open for her, for taking the conventions of her time into account, she must have been seen by the English public as morally delinquent. She never gave up her argument, and was used to referring to herself as Viscountess Avonmore. She died in Pietermaritzburg, South Africa, in 1881. Little is known about Charles Yelverton's later life, and he lost his army position as an officer in the Royal Artillery. An item in the Home News section of an 1870 New York edition of the Irish People mentions his separation from Emily, pending divorce. He inherited the Avonmore title, but as he had no heirs, it died with him.